Good morning and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. In this week's Parsha, after Yaakov has his dream with the ladder and the angels ascending and descending on it, he awakens and he said, how awesome is this place? This is the house of God. And he erects a monument to God. And then he says, he makes a vow and he says, God will be with me and protect me and watch over me and give me food to eat and clothing to wear. Then I will give tithes to God from everything that he provides me with. And what Jacob is saying is that if God will bless him and give him wealth and prosperity, he will give charity, he will give tithes. But the question is, why does it say in the verse that God will give me food to eat and clothing to wear? Lechem lecho ubeged lilbosh. Obviously, we all know that you don't wear your food or eat your clothing. It didn't have to say food, bread to eat, and clothing to wear. It could have just said, if you give me food and clothing. And one touching answer I once heard was that what Jacob was saying is that many times in life, people could have plenty of food, but unfortunately, they're in poor health and they can't eat their food. Their refrigerator and their pantry could be stocked fully, but unfortunately they can't enjoy their food. Or a person could have a walk-in closet with the biggest wardrobe of the most beautiful designer clothing, but unfortunately they're bedridden and ill and they cannot wear the clothing. So what Jacob is saying is, I don't just want to have food and clothing, I want to be able to eat the food and wear the clothing. But another answer perhaps to the explanation of why it says food to eat and clothing to wear, and then I will give tithes, is that maybe Jacob was saying is, you only need so much food to eat in life. And you only need so much clothing. So what am I going to do when God gives me more than I need? I'm going to give tithes, I'm going to help others. In other words, the perspective of Jacob was, if God gives you more than you need, why did God give it to you? He didn't give it to you for no reason. He obviously gave it to you that once you have your needs met and you have sufficient, then surely that surplus that God gave you should be to help others. As the verse says, when it talks about charity, at the ani imach, the poor man who is with you, that what belongs to the poor man is deposited by you to give to the poor man. True story that happened not long ago in California. A religious Jew bought a house, an old house from the 1920s, 100-year-old house, and the doorbell wasn't working. So he went underneath the house in the crawl space to fix the wiring to get the doorbell to work. Now there's a mailbox next to the doorbell, and when he went under the crawl space, he found a pile of envelopes underneath the house because there was a crack in the mailbox, and for decades and decades, people were putting mail in the mailbox, and some of the pieces of mail would fall through the crack and ended up in the crawl space laying in the dirt underneath the house. He collected all the envelopes, came out from underneath, and he sat down on the stoop of this house and started going over the mail. Some of them were bills, but a lot of them were personal letters, and one letter went back to 1938. As he's looking through the mail, a woman walks by and says, "Oh, do you live here?" And he says, "Yeah." And she says, "Oh, I used to live in this house back in 1995, almost 30 years ago." And he says, "That's funny you should walk by here because I've just found letters that fell through the crack of the mailbox underneath the house. I'm going through this mail now. What's your name?" And she gives him her name, and he starts looking, and sure enough, he finds a letter to her, a personal letter from a relative. She opens it up, and she reads this beautiful letter, which was over 20 years old, from a relative. And then at the end of the letter, the relative says to her, "I know the holidays are coming, Passover, and you figured you may need some extra help with the holidays." And there in the envelope was 5 crisp $100 bills. That money was sitting under the house helping no one. And the woman thankfully and gratefully took the money, and she said, "Actually, I could still use this money for the upcoming holidays this year." Unfortunately, there are people who are in need, and what the verse is telling us is, Yaakov says, God gives me clothing to wear and food to eat. I will also not just think about myself, but think about others. Because just like the money sitting underneath the house doesn't help anyone, it's a waste, it's a shame, so too money sitting, whether in a bank account or underneath a mattress, that God gave you, the extra money, is surely to look around you and help those in need and put it to good use. Have a wonderful day.